Well, I only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to get started right at the top. Hi, my name is Cali Dolfi. I am a senior data scientist in Red Hat's open source program office. And today we're going to be talking about this topic, this kind of concept I've come up with called the OSPO data pyramid and how to go about the strategy of the data analysis within your OSPO. As a little bit about me, I'm originally from Texas in the USA, and then I moved over to Boston to play softball and stayed for the computer science program. I got an internship at Red Hat whenever I was in college in the OSPO and started doing data analysis work then, and now we're here. Outside of OSPO, I do a lot of skiing, volleyball, cooking, all those good things. So. I'm going to give a basic overview of the projects in the data team that Red Hat's OSPOs works on right now, as we're going to be using this tooling throughout this presentation to give some case-by-case examples. So, as a little bit of an overview, Project Aspen is broken up into two parts. We have 8-Knot, which we're going to be demoing live. This should be the first public view of the redesign done by the Chaos Africa design team, implemented by the OSPO data team. We'll see how that all goes. We use Augur as our data source and just use a completely Python native data science toolchain. Repel is the other portion of this. And this goes under some of our open research. Pretty much any of the more complex analysis that we put into 8-Knot starts out in Repel. Right now, we're currently focusing on the contributor pyramid, which is a completely different type of pyramid, and starting on looking at usage and adoption metrics and how can we go about measuring that. As a really big, brief overview, how 8-Knot works. We use Augur, which is a project within Chaos. We give it repo and org URLs. It has a whole relational database with pretty much any GitHub information as you'd like to see with an enforced data structure. And that data goes into 8-Knot. If you have used things like Grafana or Superset, conceptually it works the same way. So. At Red Hat, our goal is to take the results that we get from the Aspen project and let it inform internal analysis and decision-making. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this is a lot more of a roundabout than it is a one-way street. As I work through requests and questions inside of Red Hat, it feeds into 8-Knot especially, and I'll be showing some case examples of that. And it's been incredibly exciting to see how our internal decision-making around communities has evolved as our data analysis portfolio has matured and evolved. One of the most surprising takeaways from this is how valuable it's been to be able to just confirm that something is happening within a community, so then you're not having these meetings over and over again trying to discuss, is this happening, and instead of that, you're able to go about what are we going to do about this. So, since this talk is, I'm gonna see if I can move this. This is very awkward. Let's try this. Maybe this is a little bit better. I don't know. I just can't read and see this. Okay. So since this talk is titled the OSPO data pyramid, it's time to start looking at some pyramids. Whenever I was a kid, I remember seeing the food pyramid in cafeterias and talked about in our classes. Our bodies need a lot of different nutrients to stay healthy, which means eating a variety of foods from each of the main food groups. The food pyramid is an analogy that displays the ratios between those different food groups to have a healthy, balanced diet. In the most basic form, the foods at the bottom is what we should eat more of, and the ones at the top less of, but it might draw our attention a bit more. In the short term, it can make us feel good and energized to our day-to-day life to have this balanced diet. And in the long term, it can reduce our risk for different diseases. This concept can apply directly about how we think about and apply and prioritize our community data analysis within an OSPO. So we'll go into the OSPO data pyramid. And now, instead of thinking about what foods we eat, it's about who an OSPO directly interacts with, or are the stakeholders in regards to the data analysis we do. The basis of community data analysis is the open source communities, or are the open source communities. This can be how we interact and assist the communities we're already involved in, inform the work of our community managers, or can help determine which communities we get involved in the first place. As OSPOs, we are beholden to the companies that we work for. It can be easy to look internally first, especially towards those C-suites and all of the products that determine the trajectory of our companies. But if our focus is just there, we're doing ourselves a disservice, as that's not a long-term balanced diet for an OSPO. We have to fuel ourselves with healthy communities to be able to sustain our open source efforts that benefit our companies in the long term. Now let's break down each portion of this pyramid. So, the base level is where we're going to spend most of our time and effort, and it also feeds into those higher levels of the pyramid. This can look like different types of community health analysis. This could be understanding a community better in a general sense or for guiding assistance. Proactive data analysis allows for more strategic initiatives and the ability to measure success. Aligning initiatives with metrics should be considered at inception, not as an afterthought. Gearing up community initiatives with metrics from the beginning allows for the ability to measure success, and we can tune those metrics as necessary as we go. Another portion of this is comparative analysis between communities. When considering an upstream, community health analysis should be an integral part of that decision-making process. So, how does this look in action? We're going to hop over to our 8-knot and go, this is at the repo overview page. We're going to load this up real quick. Move back over. So whenever I'm looking at a community more in a general sense, we'll let this load for a second. I said, this is the first live demo. This is locally hosted, so we'll see what happens. I will be quick to hop back over to the more stable form if that's what we need to do. But whenever I'm looking at a community for the first time, a lot of times I start first at this repo overview page. We can start to see the file language, the languages by file breakdown, by lines of code, understanding kind of what is the basis of this project, looking at package version updates, and then looking at these OpenSSF scorecards and this repo general info. Something to note is that if you have an organization in, which this one 8-knot automatically loads in the chaos organization, you can make sure that you're looking at the individual repository that you're trying to look at, because you can't have the OpenSSF scorecard is built from a repository base, not from analyzing an entire community. And so you have to, with some of the per repo analysis, you have to make sure you're looking at the repository that you're looking for. Another thing that I like to look at is going and looking at the pull request activity from a staleness standpoint as a very quick thing. Well, it's a little bit hard to see. But as a quick thing for staleness, you're just looking at how long from the time that a pull request has been open to whenever it's been closed or merged, trying to see how many of these pull requests are staying open for extended periods of time. Another thing to note about 8-knot is that there's a lot of different inputs that you can put in because the thresholds are going to be different for which communities that you're looking at. So there is staleness is some of the things that I like to look at. Issue activity staleness, which is a similar concept, just that there's usually a higher threshold, or it's more normal to have a large amount of issues in your backlog. Another thing that I like to go and look at is looking at the contributor engagement over time. Let's see, there we go. Or the growth by engagement. So you're always going to have, and this is one of the ones that's a little bit interesting, looking at chaos, it was involved in a huge hackathon for somebody's first contribution. And so when we're looking at contributor growth by engagement, which is pretty much the concept that you're always going to have your total number of contributors being up and to the right, but how many of those contributors are staying as active members of the community? It could be different people, but seeing how many of that total is actually staying stable within the community, things like that. If we have time at the end, I'm also going to look over at some of the other communities. I was actually trying to see Istio, but this loaded up a little bit different. So yeah, those are a few of the examples. We can go through more at the end if we end up having time. The next portion of this is the middle area. And this one's been an interesting one that has really developed for us in the last year or so. Data analysis can be a vessel to be able to build trust in relationships between different organizations throughout our company. At any company, I know that OSPOs are trying to fight the good fight to make sure open source is understood and prioritized. OSPOs being able to make data-backed claims can level the prioritization playing field and assist the teams around us. In practice, I've seen analysis to be the reason why certain teams walk through the OSPO door, and I can send them out with analysis and necessary context for this information to be useful. And I can connect them with an OSPO member that can help with their efforts going forward. This actually has happened twice in the last week alone, where people have come to me for specific data analysis requests. I provide that, and I kind of pass them off to the community manager that's actually involved in the community that they didn't even know that it existed. Having this ability to bridge that is able to make the connections and allows for our OSPO to be able to be more aligned with the products and the teams that are like downstream. So how does this look like in action? A lot of times this is curating analysis and reports to specific questions and circumstances. Sometimes that can look like empowering people to use 8-Not to answer the questions themselves, walking them through, showing which visualizations and metrics match the questions that they have. Sometimes that is creating a curated report for them directly. Priority level and circumstance can kind of determine which way you go about doing this, or at least how we do. This is an opportunity to truly show and not tell that our OSPO is subject matter experts. And these questions is a lot where a lot of the new analysis angles begin. Things that go into 8-Not or some of our more mature analysis almost always comes from a case example. And so these requests strengthen how we prioritize what analysis we develop. This is actually coming into play right now. Something around usage and adoption is something that's been really asked for to our OSPO about how to analyze communities. That's a very hard question to answer, and now that's a priority to us of looking at from like the data science working group with our involvement in chaos and things like that. So, the last one is your C-suite level. Anyone who's worked in an OSPO knows how difficult it is to get your C-suite to understand the whole open source thing. And against probably popular belief, this is an issue even within Red Hat when open source is a clear part of our branding. Many times the messaging that people go for to our C-suite with does not change with the addition of metrics and visualization. The value of open source can feel like this intangible thing. And providing data points behind your claims provides that backing and confidence, even if it's not the ever-elusive ROI metric that we always will get asked for. This again allows data to be that bridge, a place of familiarity to build trust along the organization. It's the ability to actually put some value behind saying that we're making data-driven decision-making and showing how that can impact the decisions that we make. We can go to what this looks like in action. I actually was planning on going over to these reports in the prior level, but these can be viewed at from like a C-suite standpoint, but a lot of times it's more from the middle collaboration. But sometimes I was kind of wanting to show what some of these reports actually look like that we end up doing internally. Somebody will come to me with a couple of different questions, in this case, trying to compare two different open source communities that have a similar context, and a lot of times we'll show those comparative analysis. These are actually just the same exact visualizations that are from 8-Not, but sometimes we want to provide those in a report right next to each other so they're able to see them and be able to make that more strategic decision or follow it over time to kind of continue if we're going to be involved in both to see which direction that we want to go in. This can look like, another form of this was we did analysis on the community of Triton to understand where the contributors are to be able to have I don't remember at the time if it was a hackathon or just a meetup. And so we can strategically put our meetups where we have contributors that we want to get involved in. These are some of those examples that were in that middle level, but that can also apply to how it looks when you're working with the C-suite. But whenever it comes to the C-suite, a lot of times we're looking for reports and visualizations that align with the top level company goals. Something that our team is working on right now is flagging the top communities alongside our internal strategy. So going directly within the structure that everyone else in the company is used to seeing, but including the upstream analysis that goes with those different strategic points. And what accesses that we're considering to kind of flag these top projects are still in its final form, but we're wanting to go right alongside the strategy, so then it's connecting to people and showing how these upstream communities are important and align with our top level goals. And what this actually looks like is very case to case. The data that goes into these graphs and presentations are just going to align with what the priorities are of the leadership that you're working with. So, whenever I started down this path of community data analysis, my central goal was to take something that would take a person 10, 20, 40 hours to answer on their own and turn it into a 20-minute process, with the vast majority of that time spent towards processing and understanding the information in front of them. That hasn't changed. If anything, it's been deeply validated and grown. Community is always going to be the base and pivotal portion of the work. It is all about what you do at that level that feeds into the value above. If you do not have a stable and vibrant base of upstreams, it's not useful to show visualizations and metrics at the cross-organization level or for C-suite advocacy. Our OSPO efforts and analysis need to have a balanced diet, so let's start by fueling ourselves correctly. Thank you. I think we have a couple minutes for questions. Yeah?
These projects are open source?
Yes.
And the reports that you shared at the end between E2A versus MCP?
So that's just a report. That one's it's not a public report. But 8-Knot is a public repository, and Rappel does have a lot of the report structures that you can use. But that specific report is not going to be public now.
8-Knot covers all the open source projects, or just a specific type?
8-Knot is at this point can take in any GitHub repository. You can open a request if you want that to be in the public instance of 8-Knot. There's a little link right there at the 8-Knot website to be able to request specific repositories, or you can take it, fork it, clone it yourself, and host your own internal instance or just self-hosted instance of 8-Knot, pair it with an Augur database, and put in whatever repositories you want. Right now, it's fully functional with GitHub. We're working on GitLab, and Augur works with any Git-based structure, so realistically, it can expand to any type of Git-based repository. Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. I'm the numbers person. Whenever it comes to like internal requests, the people in my OSPO know I will go to them first and be like, this is the question. I'll get the context of what the question is, specifically about community. I'll be providing the the quantitative analysis, and the qualitative normally comes from the community managers that are more actively involved in those communities or more aware of it.
Can you feed the tool with data? Like, do you store the answer somewhere in the database also?
Yeah.
Not with the capitalized, okay.
Yes.
Still human.
It's pretty much that's going to be that's all data that's directly collected from GitHub, and we use that. Sometimes the things that I learned from the community managers, I try to take that knowledge and turn it into a visualization or a way to use the data to provide that context. But I will always go to be pairing with people who know those communities the most and see what I can learn and we can provide to the people who are asking the questions. All right, I think that's the top of my time. Thank you, everybody. Also, I'll be at the Red Hat booth through the end of the afternoon, so if you have any more questions or would like to look and use 8-Knot to look at any specific community you would like, we can do that. There also will be a more in-depth 8-Knot demo at the Red Hat booth tomorrow morning directly after the keynotes. So if 8-Knot's what you want to see, that's where it's going to be all about 8-Knot. Thank you.